President John Dramani Mahama, thank you very much for receiving Radio France International and our sister TV station France 24 to Ghana for RFI's special live edition of Accra Live PM. Now, before we start this interview, perhaps you would like to share your comments, your views, your feelings about the recent events that brought pain, death to France, to Mali and to Lebanon.
Yeah. We stand in solidarity with all countries that are affected by terrorism, because it's a threat to our common humanity, our values, our democracy, and any country that is affected, it affects the rest of us. So we're in solidarity with France, we're in solidarity with Mali, we're in solidarity with Lebanon, and indeed any country where, terrorism, has been inflicted on the people. And so we have to fight terrorism together, and we stand in solidarity with all the countries that have been affected.
In 2012, your autobiography came out. It carried the rather provocative title of My First Coup d'etat. It could have given the impression that you were the coup plotter, but in fact, you were only 8 at the time when Kwame Nkrumah, the then president and founder of the nation, was toppled. Your father, of course, went into exile at the time of the coup. That's the coup that's actually mentioned, obviously in the title, the one you referred to then. But Ghana has been a beacon of democracy since the 80s. You yourself, on the death of John Mills, you were vice president, you became interim president, and in December 2012, soon afterwards, you were elected, democratically elected, president. So why pick such a title? Do you not regret having picked such a title?
No, I don't. Because the particular story, which is my first coup d'etat, is the pivot around which the whole book revolves. And it is just the title of one of the chapters of the stories. It's a collection of stories in what I call the lost decades of Africa. But the coup d'etat affected my family circumstances in such a way that it affected my consciousness growing up. And that is why we decided to put that title. It was done in consultation with my editor, with my publishers, and we decided that that was the title. And I think it's been well received. The book has had quite very good reviews, and it's done well in terms of purchases.
You wrote that it was at school that you really fell in love with the subject of history, and indeed you went on to obtain a bachelor's degree in the subject in 1981, and then you taught it for a few years as well. Do you think this background impacted your approach into politics, and if so, how do you think it did?
It did. And at first I had wanted to do other courses. I wanted to do law, but I mistakenly chose business administration, and somehow I missed out on all of them and ended up doing history. But looking back, I believe that it was fortuitous that I did history, because it really has made me who I am. History makes you study human civilization and, study, the world over time. I mean, to think that this world is millions and millions and millions of years old, and that for all of us, myself and you, we're just a drop in time, it gives you a certain tolerance, it gives you a certain insight that you won't get from learning any other subject. And when I combine history and communications, especially with social psychology, which is the study of human behavior, I think that created a perfect nexus to prepare me for the responsibilities that I am currently having to undertake.
I understand that you were a committed socialist before you went to Moscow, where you gained a postgraduate degree majoring in social psychology, as you mentioned earlier. That was in 1998. What these years of perestroika, of glasnost, then in Russia, teach you? Did they reinforce, did they weaken your political ideals and beliefs?
Yes, I was an active socialist, especially on campus. I belonged to a socialist cell, and we read the works of Marx and Engels and Lenin and all that, and we were waiting for the socialist revolution in Ghana, indeed preparing for the socialist revolution in Ghana. I still am a left-of-center politician. I'm a social democrat. And I still believe that the state needs to intervene to ensure that the fruits of growth are fairly shared. It's not everything the market can do perfectly. But I'm not an ideologue anymore, because I realize that you don't have a one-size-fits-all solution for every country. If socialism works in Russia, it doesn't mean it will work in Ghana. We must find our own solutions to our own challenges. And when I went to Russia, I saw that the society was not perfect. Before I went to Russia, I believed that it was the model of equality, and that, you know, there was no discrimination and everybody lived, you know, as his brother's keeper. I mean, obviously that was not the case. I went to Russia when Gorbachev was president. And the Russian society itself was questioning a lot of things. There was perestroika, there was glasnost. They were now being able to speak up more freely. And you could tell that they themselves were questioning whether what they were doing was right, you know. And so it actually shook my beliefs in a way. And I realized that, look, no country had the perfect answer. And so we needed to come to Ghana, of course, using best practices from all over the world, but fashioning a solution that fitted Ghana and the Ghanaian people. And so I'm still a left-of-center politician. I'm a social democrat. But I think that we must find Ghanaian solutions to Ghanaian challenges.
You have remained something of an activist, an advocate, in your current political life. For instance, you often bring up gender parity in your many pronouncements, in your speeches, and the need for Africa to recognize and respect its female citizens. You also urge the continent to stop blocking their ability to play a larger role in nation building. Would you consider yourself a feminist?
I believe in women's empowerment, because women are a significant proportion of our population. In Ghana, women are the majority. There are more women in Ghana than men. And so you can't have more than half of your population playing second fiddle or being disempowered. If we empower women, it is positive for our society. It will have a positive effect on our society. And as soon as I had the opportunity, I made sure that I appointed a lot of women into my government, and they hold some of the most responsible positions in my government. You know, foreign affairs, transport, justice and attorney general, fisheries, education. You know, they hold very responsible positions, and they're doing a good job.
What course of action are you being able to take in order to promote women in the private sector so they can actually break through what they call the glass ceiling? For instance, there seem to be, in the West, for instance, few women CEOs.
In the private sector, yes, they are still in the minority, but they're beginning to show up. I mean, we have several banks today where women are the CEO. I can talk of Barclays Bank in Ghana, the chief executive is a woman. I can talk of the Union Bank of Africa, UBA, the chief executive is a woman. And so even in the private sector, women are beginning to break through and take, you know, quite serious responsibility. And they do a good job when they're giving that responsibility. And so I have no regrets, no apologies. I'm a strong advocate for women's empowerment, and I'll continue to do so as long as I have the power and influence to be able to do it.
Now, Nelson Mandela has always held a special place in your heart. Why was that? And can you remember the first time you ever met him? What are your memories of that meeting?
Nelson Mandela, like all the other great, liberationists of Africa, are people I adore. And so one of the times I went to South Africa, I was Minister of Communications, and President Mandela had just retired as President of South Africa. And I was living in the Cape San Hotel. I had gone for a communications conference. Those were the early days of telecom deregulation. And I went out with some of my colleagues, ministers. We went to a restaurant and had a meal, and then we drank a little wine and all that. And then we dispersed to our hotels. And so I walked into my hotel. This was a little after midnight. And I walked to the lift, pressed the button, and I saw the lift coming down. And so I was just standing right in front of it. I didn't know there was anybody in it. I thought I had called it. And then the lift stopped, the door opened, and 3 people were in the lift walking out. So I had to step aside for them to pass. I didn't expect that it would be Mandela. And so my mind couldn't register it. My mouth was, tongue-tied. I was speechless. I just watched in awe as the man just walked away. And it was only after he went through the gate, I said, oh my God, this was Mandela. I had the opportunity to shake his hand or to say something to him. You're stupid. Why couldn't you talk? So that was my first encounter with him. I was speechless. I was tongue-tied. I couldn't move. My mouth couldn't open. And he just walked through the door. The next time was in the Pan-African Parliament. I was a member of the Pan-African Parliament. And he was invited to come and open our session. And so there, as a member, I was the leader of the West African Caucus. And so I was called to be together with the president of the parliament when Mandela was received. And so finally I had the opportunity to shake his hand. But he continues to be a great man and an icon for me.
And I know that music is another great love of yours. If we were to look at your iPod or look at your playlists, what would we see on them at the moment?
You find songs from all over the world. I like Latin American music. I like Julio Iglesias. You find Julio Iglesias. You find Jim Reeves. It's such a wide collection. You find hip-hop. You find Ghanaian high life. You'll find Yusundur, you'll find Fela Ransom Kuti. So many. You'll find Barry White, Isaac Hayes.
Music from across the globe and across the time.
From across the globe. Old music, the Bee Gees, Temptations, Marvin Gaye. Just name it. Millie Jackson, all of it. I have it. And I buy a lot of music. I download a lot of music from iTunes. And so any new music, old music that I haven't heard in a long time, I have it all on my iPod. Indeed, I think I have 5 iPods.
I think I need to get a copy of your iTunes. Sounds fantastic.
And my cloud must be big. I'm saving a lot of music in my cloud.
Finally, your first book was well received, no less than writers such as Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Aminata Fona and Chinua Achebe praised it warmly. Now, the notice on the page about the author actually mentioned the fact that the writer was at work on his second book. Now, how close are you to publication date?
I feel honored to have had the notes that were written by Aminata Fona and Ngugi, and also Chinua Achebe. I feel very fortunate because these are great people when it comes to the world of literature. I've been working on another book, and unfortunately, because of my responsibilities, it's not going as fast as my first coup d'etat went. But it's my hope that by the time I'm leaving office, if I get elected for a second term, I should be, almost there.
And what is it likely to focus on?
That's my secret.
Thank you very much, President Mahama, for receiving us here, answering all our questions so graciously and with great wit and humour.
It's always been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.